What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're going to be checking out the CJRB Mini Pyrite, and I picked this one up at CCKS roughly a year ago, so unfortunately no longer available with the Ultem scales you see on this one. However, there are 7 other configurations available and in stock over on Amazon for roughly $46, so I'll make sure to leave a link to this one down in the description in case you're interested in picking it up. Now, Mini Pyrite, this is obviously the miniaturized version of the super popular Pyrite model from CJRB. I don't have that original Pyrite, but I do have a Pyrite Lite, and the Pyrite Lite and the OG are pretty similar in terms of dimensions. The main difference is that the Lite uses lighter materials, FRN for the scales, and so it weighs a little bit less. It's also a little bit more budget friendly, but I did think it was important to do a quick comparison between this and my Pyrite Lite, because although it's called Mini, a lot of people might not realize just how miniature it actually is. So let's set that down. I'll grab my Pyrite Lite and do my best to line these up so we can get a fair comparison of the two. And as you can see, it's a pretty significant difference. It's not like they just scaled it down 5 or even 10%. They dropped it quite a bit. In fact, that Mini is probably only about 1.5 inches to maybe 1.75 inches longer than the handle portion of the Pyrite. So like I said, pretty significant difference. Mini is measuring in at 5.32 inches in overall length. That gives us 3.15 inches on the handle, so pretty small, but we do have this generous sharpening choil that can double as a finger choil. In fact, I use it for exactly that. And the ergos honestly are pretty solid for such a small little knife, especially for the light duty type of cutting task you're going to be using this for. They are a little bit on the cramp side, but again, not super bothersome with the types of cutting you're going to be doing. And also, it's cramped, and I still only have a 3-finger grip, so my pinky is hanging off the back of there. So if you don't utilize that finger choil, you may be only a 2-finger grip on this knife. So I definitely like to creep up there. Nothing to keep you from rolling on the blade, so obviously be careful with that, but much more comfortable. Feels great for those type of tasks. And again, for the light duty stuff you're going to be using, absolutely perfect. Now, where the ergos struggle a little bit, I will say, because of the size, is when you're trying to deploy this. So I do think there was a pretty significant learning curve. I have it down pretty well now to flicking that open with my middle finger. You can always just use the button to flick it out, and that works very effectively. It's nice and secure in your grip. When you're flicking it open, if you don't have enough pressure on there, it's pretty easy to just drop it while you're flicking it open. It's also easy if you don't get enough pressure inside of that thumb hole to not be able to flick it open. It just ends up failing or not opening at all. And so there's a little bit of learning curve there. Definitely could have benefited from just a little bit more real estate to hold on to, or a more grippy handle material. The Ultem itself is pretty slick. Don't know if the other configurations are a little bit more grippy than this, but I would just count on it being a little bit of a slippery knife to have a learning curve on deploying it. Now, the one nice thing about these Ultem scales, besides if you like the overall look, which I do, is that they are see-through, so we can see those nested liners and the speed holes drilled into them to save a little bit of weight. And so this one is ultra lightweight at only about 1.8 ounces. Moving over to that blade, we got AR RPM 9 and this beautiful Wharncliffe style blade. Huge fan of that. I love Wharncliffe's. Perfect for this size knife too. Great for those utility cuts and the types of things you're going to be using this knife for. Wharncliffe is, I think, the perfect blade shape for it. Have a nearly full flat grind. Not quite full flat grind. This is probably like 95%. You see it cuts off there with about 1 millimeter or so to go. Very minimal branding on here as well. We have CJRB on the front tucked nicely up against the handles, and on the back we have AR RPM 9 as well as that model designation, which you don't really need to know since you can look it up with Mini Pyrite, and again, I'll make sure to link to it down in the description. I believe it's J1933 if you do want to look it up, but maybe misreading that. It's pretty small, fine print. And so the other area where the size may play a little bit of a factor is just in that fidget factor. I'd say this one is not as satisfying as the Lite, and I think a big part of that is that there's not a lot of weight behind that blade, and so when it's dropping shut, it doesn't feel like it's going as fast. When you open it, it doesn't feel as snappy as the Lite does, and again, I think the big part of that is just because the blade itself doesn't weigh that much. It's on ceramic ball bearings, just like the Pyrite Lite. That button, it has great action, very minimal button stick, if any at all. A little bit there. There was again, very minimal, barely noticeable, and in some cases not present at all. But it is a little bit less satisfying to fidget with in the full size, and again has that learning curve that I mentioned earlier. But again, that button operates perfectly. Ceramic ball bearings, very, very smooth, great detent on here. Well, not detent, but kind of an implied detent, you know what I mean. We have this barrel here for our lanyard tube, and so you can attach a lanyard, kind of a nice accent there. It's like a brass color lanyard tube, which is nice. And then we have our deep carry pocket clip. This is a pretty stout little pocket clip, not the prettiest design, but it works overall, and it is reversible, which is nice. It's not inset into the handle though, so that's not going to be flush, but overall it's nice that it's reversible. It is very deep carry, and it's a nice stout pocket clip. Overall, I think this is a really solid knife. I will say, although I usually prefer smaller knives, miniature knives, I'm a huge fan of them. In this case, I think the light is just a better knife for me. I prefer it in my hands, I prefer fidgeting with it, and it just feels a little bit better size-wise. I think it helps that I have the light version because it's ultra lightweight, but still, I do think that this is one where the full-size version is a little bit better than the small version for me. And I know for most people that's usually the case, and so it might be even a little bit more dramatic for those that prefer larger knives. But let me know what you think of this one down in the comments below. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, joining the channel as a member, or checking out some of my other videos. It all helps the channel out a ton. And as always, I hope you have a great one. Take care.